right. Thank you all for joining me tonight for this presentation. We have the history of herbs, culinary and medicinal. So that's kind of just a generic title. This is a new one. I also have one that I recently did at one of the libraries in Gwinnett on windowsill herb gardening. So this one's kind of a little bit of a history on herbs, their uses, a little bit more on the culinary side, so you can kind of delve into the different types that are used around the world and different types of cooking. So if you, as I just mentioned, if you are interested in the slide deck, feel free to give me an email. My email address will appear as the last slide, and I am happy to share the slide deck with you. I do try to put as much as I possibly can on the slides so that you can go back at a later date. And if you don't remember everything, it's all pretty much right there. So let's go ahead and dive in. So we'll kind of start off with what is an herb? So I think we all feel like we know what that is, but it's going to be like the leaves, the flowers, fruits and berries, bark, roots, all of that kind of stuff that's going to have kind of an aromatic sense to it, very flavorful, sometimes medicinal, sometimes curative, and possibly spiritual properties. Not everybody's probably going to use the spiritual part, but it's there. Just know that. And sometimes the fact that there's some hallucinogenic properties to some of these herbs is why they're used spiritually. So we'll kind of delve into a little bit about that. Know that herbs are different from spices. Spices are kind of defined separately, and they're going to be like dried seeds. They're going to be other types of barks, roots, gums of the plant, fruits of the plant, and some examples like cardamom, sassafras, cloves, allspice, that kind of stuff. Herbs have a very broad and diverse use. So culinary, of course, most of us think about that when we're talking about what we're going to do with herbs. So cooking. And a lot of that stuff like basil, thyme, oregano, we use a lot of that. And you'll see here that many of these herbs are used all around the world for different things and sometimes the same. Maybe you tasted something in a dish at a restaurant one time and you're like, I can't quite place that. I don't know. It tastes different, but well, you might be able to figure out based on this presentation what it is. Medicinal. So we're going to take a deep dive back into Native American history and kind of what they used all through time so that we can kind of see how herbs and other types of plants ended up being used for medicine all the way through to today. And then, of course, spiritual, and that includes herbs and rituals, incense, purification, and Native Americans do come into play here. Now, of course, this is just my perspective from here in the US. There's going to be a different perspective if you're in a different part of the world, of course, because different cultures use them in different ways. But this is just a sampling of what you can expect for here in the US. All right. Herbs through time. So this is just a really quick synopsis. I mean, this is something I quickly pulled together. So prehistoric use, as actually probably further back than that, 60,000 years ago, they have, early humans using things like the bark of willow trees for early antibiotics and aspirin, things like that. Then you have the Sumerians, 500 or 5000 BC. So they inscribed in their tablets use of herbs in medicines. You've got Egyptian scrolls that used listed medicinal plants like mustard, saffron, cinnamon, and cassia. You have China and India written into texts there. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to try to pronounce everything because I am not an expert on linguistics. And there's some stuff that I will probably tongue tie myself on trying to say. But again, you can always get the slides. You have the Roman physician, Hippocrates, So that's, the Hippocratic Oath. That's where that comes from. And they had herbal remedies of up to 100 ingredients. That's a lot of different herbs. Monks, of course, they live a very simplistic lifestyle. So they had gardens that were dedicated to growing herbs, and then, writing those traditions down. The Goths, so they demanded gold and silver, of course, silks, which are valuable. But who would have thought? 3,000 pounds of peppercorns as a ransom. Apparently, that's worth a lot of money. And then Islamic scholars that also used herbal medicines, and believe it or not, they were very good about recording what that was and what those medicines were. So in texts like the Canon of Medicine, and those were passed through to European folks who then used it. So that's a very early recorded in history for herbs. The Emperor Charlemagne had up to 74 different herbs planted in his garden, so they were used for various things. Then you have green sauce, a recipe for sage and parsley that was used for the upper class and whetting their appetite. And then in the 19th century, scientific advancements started to lead to pharmaceutical extractions of plant compounds that showed valuable use, like aspirin, and some others. And then today, about 25% of our current pharmaceuticals contain active ingredients that have been extracted from plants. Some of those would be considered herbs, some just from plants, but that kind of gives you an idea that plants play a big role in our medicinal health, and there's all sorts of stuff out there that's yet to be discovered. Even here in the U.S., I mean, a lot of times we think that it's the rainforests or the undiscovered places, but medical science is constantly trying new things to see which compounds might have uses. So the odd uses of herbs. Let's say it fast, 5 times herbs in history. Um, Embalming, that's kind of a creepy one, but embalming and preservation, I think we knew that. Most of us have learned that the Egyptians, they used to do the old swizzle that up there in your nose to break that apart and get all your brain tissue out, but they also used different types of herbs to help um, preserve and mummify the bodies. Rosemary was often used and placed in coffins during funerals for remembrance and purification. With another reason, as in back in the way back times, we didn't really have embalming like we did now, and so sometimes it got a little smelly. So the rosemary is very aromatic, and that would cover up some of those odors. Currency and trade. Saffron. You may remember back from history class that that was very highly valued as a spice, and almost as high as gold, and was actually used as a currency in way back times. And then peppercorns, I just mentioned that. They requested those from the Romans. Then you have pest control and household uses, hyssop and tansy. So back in medieval England, they would put that around on the floors to help kind of mask some of the stinky odors and repel insects, fleas, things like that. I mean, let's face it, they had really bad body hygiene back then. You had the plague, that was from all the rats that were living in there with them. They didn't have very good body hygiene. I mean, they might go, I don't know, a month or two without a bath. And even then, you start off with dad getting in the tub all the way down to the baby, and don't throw the baby out with the bath water. And that's because it was so dark and gross and cloudy that you didn't know the baby was in there. So yeah, they really needed something that smelled a little better than them to kind of mask some of their odors. So lavender and mint, you'll notice a lot of essential oils in here used in wardrobes to help deter the moths and to freshen clothing. And then with warfare and defense, garlic, they fed that to Roman soldiers, and that was supposed to, give them vim and vigor so that they could fight to the death. Hot peppers, used in chemical warfare by indigenous groups. So they would start smoking stuff. And if you've ever worked with a habanero or something else and you got the oil in your eyes because you weren't really careful about washing your hands, or man, God forbid, if you went to the bathroom and you don't wash your hands, you will know really quick why hot peppers can be a very effective defense against something. But if you can get that into a gaseous or a smoky atmosphere, you can do a lot of damage. Superstitions and rituals, of course, I mentioned that. So, mugwort believed to protect travelers from evil spirits, and thyme, which was worn by knights in medieval times for courage. So preparing and storing herbs very quickly, not going to do a whole lot on this. Again, if you have questions, dump those into the chat box and I will get to those at the end. And I do have my email address and all of that contact info at the end on the last slide. And I also do record these. So these will all go over to our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So preparing and storing, there are a lot of different ways that herbs have been used over time. Of course, a lot of times you have fresh herbs. If you have a garden and you grow a lot of that stuff yourself, then you can use them fresh and they're very, very strong. The aromatics are very strong in them at that time. But you know, you got to have something for winter, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can dry them and then store in a sealed jar in a cool, dark place. Most of the herbs that we have as spices that are really just spices, herbs, kind of interchangeable in our spice cabinets. That's how we store them. They're all just dried and then we use them that way. Fresh herbs, of course, wash, dry, wrap in a paper towel and put in a Ziploc bag or put them in some water to refrigerate. And we all probably in the middle of winter have those plastic packets from the grocery store with thyme or basil or something in there that's dehydrated and looks half dead. So it's always better if you have it in the summertime to preserve it so that you can use it in the wintertime. Infusions, so that's going to be for like a tea, where you have flowers and leaves and hot water, and that kind of helps with the volatile oils to help infuse that. Decoctions, that's where you're extracting those active ingredients from roots, bark, twigs, or berries, and then you simmer those. So that's used medicinally. Tinctures, again, used medicinally. So you're going to take fresh herbs or dried herbs that you have and steep them in alcohol and water. And that alcohol helps preserve them. Syrup, that's going to be with honey or sugar added. So if you have a very bitter tasting herb, then a lot of times they'll use that as a syrup and that helps improve the taste. Compress, that's going to be a cold cloth pad that's been soaked with an herbal extract, and then you use that. Maybe you have a bruise or something, and you're trying to get that to come to the surface, that kind of stuff. And then a poultice, fresh or boiled chopped herb that's spread on the site, and then you wrap that with some type of a cloth, like you see the hand above there, and that's to hold that in place so that it can act as like a drawing salve and pull out whatever you're trying to do. So that's just a quick rundown of how you would prepare those. So now, make sure, yep. So making sure, moving on here, we'll talk a little bit more about through time. We're just going to take a trip through time. So this is a little bit of history here, in addition to some horticulture stuff, but it's always interesting and you learn something, so it's not a lost day, right? So here's the pilgrim's view of herbal medicine. That's the four humors, and that's that circle that you see there on the side. If you're super curious, let me move that. If you're super curious, there's a QR code there, and that will take you to, I think it's the National Institutes of Health. They have a really nice document that I got this from that will tell you all about the four humors and back in Shakespeare's time. And so basically, illnesses, this is way before man had much knowledge, illness was attributed to an imbalance in the impurities in these four major humors. I don't know why they call it humor, but the humors were blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And so they had to be removed by bleeding, so blood. That's why they used leeches, kind of gross. Purging, so that would be making somebody regurgitate. Choler, which would be yellow bile. I didn't dive too deep into this. Again, I skimmed over the top. Melancholy, which is black bile, and that's going to be mostly through sweating and that kind of stuff. And they believed that if you had an imbalance in these, then that would mean you were getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So Aspects of plants were often tied to disease. So, remember, people back then were not very educated. So, when you had jaundice, which means that your liver was not doing so well, so you have bile. So the yellows in your eyes would be yellow. You'd have a sallow, yellowish tone to your skin. Sometimes they would blame that on the poor flowers. So you'd have yellow clandine flowers, and they tied that to jaundice. And they said, oh, you must be eating or drinking too much of that. And then sometimes red flowers and St. John's wort was used to close wounds. It had maybe clotting properties. And then walnut meats that looked like a brain, because they kind of do look like a brain, English walnuts do, were used for all sorts of brain issues, which to me, that's way better than if they took and what's it called when they do it as a trepanner, where they basically take a chisel, chisel a hole in your head. I'd like to keep my brain in there. Thank you. I'll just take the walnut meats. But so settlers who were new to this country benefited from the skill of those Native Americans, and we'll talk about Native Americans who understood more of the value of these plants. So their knowledge was very rudimentary. Remember, they came from England, which is completely different in a lot of respects than here. So many of the plants, as they learned and they were here longer, like sassafras, China root, spicebush, sarsaparilla, and all these others, once they learned what those were used for, they exported them back to England. So they were able to possibly grow them over there. Colonial herb gardeners. So as we moved a little bit further in, um, after they'd settled in North America, most gardeners, gardens that back then served one purpose and one purpose only, and that was to feed your family. So you had to grow as much as you possibly could, and then you had to preserve it somehow, usually through canning or whatever, so that you had food through the winter. They also grew medicinal plants next to all of those food plants because remember, you couldn't just go down to the dock of the box, urgent care if you had some problem. You basically had to treat it at home. I mean, you only really had what you grew or what you could forage in the woods. So they all had their food garden, and then they usually had an apothecary garden. That's basically a pharmacy back then, and for easy access so that they would just grow those things and have them right there. So some of the medicinal herbs that they used, they relied on some of the stuff they knew that they brought with them and some of the things that they learned when they moved here. So that would be yarrow and wound healing, reducing fever, echinacea. That's used to strengthen your immune system. Chamomile, sleep, and digestive. I mean, I don't know. Did you have your mom give you chamomile tea to go before you went to bed because you were having a hard time falling asleep? There's the reasoning to it. Peppermint, that's for gastrointestinal discomfort. We still do that. We still use peppermint. If you got an Altoids, if you have an upset stomach, sometimes you can take that and that'll help. Lavender, used for relaxation, helping to sleep. Hyssop, that's also for respiratory ailments. That kind of helps with pertussis, whooping cough, that kind of stuff. That was used back then. Horehound, cough syrups, lozenges. Mint, treatment for stomach ailments and headaches. Mint tea. Pennyroyal, I don't know what that is, but repels insects and alleviate colds. Catnip, besides your cat really liking it, used in tea for relaxation. Bergamot, now used in perfumes, but also for an insect repellent. And then they would use the typicals for cooking: thyme, sage, parsley, rosemary, dill, basil, caraway, and chives. Those were all just well used and well loved, brought over from overseas and set up here. So Native Americans, and we're going to talk about the Cherokees because the Cherokees are endemic to this part of the country down in the southeast. So the Native Americans, they were the experts on using herbs and foraging and that kind of stuff. So they knew a lot. And if, I really, it's a sad history, and I'm not going to go into that, but we did learn a lot from them. And so they relied on plants to treat a lot of common ailments. They would use teas, poultices, and infusions. So mullein, that's used for respiratory issues, and I'll have pictures of these later on so you can see what they are. And congestion feverwort, that's in teas for fevers. Golden seal, that's an immunity booster and a natural antibiotic. Saltbush, used in bug bites and stings, and arnica used for muscle pains and bruises. You can still buy a lot of this stuff now. You can order it, more natural healing than a lot of the stuff that science has given us. Then you have the spiritual and cultural significance. So you had sweetgrass and sage. That was used and burned in purification. That's still done today, folks. A lot of people still believe in sage being a purifier of the environment and warding off bad demons and juju, all that kind of stuff. Tobacco, that was used in offerings and prayers. Cedar, considered very sacred, used in rituals. And, these folks really had a very deep and very connected nature with their natural world. And that's definitely to be preserved and honored, I think. So some common medicinal herbs, and you'll notice the asterisks there. So the asterisks go down to the bottom and it says, please don't apply or ingest any of these materials unless you are 100% certain of their identification and your medical provider clears all and they don't conflict with any existing medications. I have to put that in there because I don't want people going, oh, I'm going to go over here and have some of this blackberry leaf and it be poison ivy. And then you get a horrible reaction and you end up in the hospital and then you try to blame me. We're not doing that. So I have to cover myself and that's why that's there. But this is for educational purposes so you can learn some of the stuff that these folks and us still use to this day for ailments and things that are bothering us. So you have mullein. So they dried the leaves. Again, that was used for the roots for swollen joints, the leaves for chest congestions, and they use the flower for the tea. It just doesn't look like a whole lot. It's out there in the pasture, but apparently it's very valuable. You've got wild ginger. They would make tea from roots, and that was good for expectorants. If you had, some type of bronchitis or something like that, it would help to expectorate or get that phlegm out. You had blackberry, that was used for inflammation and joint pain. They would chew those leaves to relieve a sore throat. They could use that root and add honey for an expectorant to cough up that stuff. Sumac, they would boil that tree bark for sore throats, and black cohosh that apparently can help induce labor. If you are pregnant, do not go out and get some black cohosh. Okay, we don't want that baby to come too soon. But anything female, the black cohosh is, and you can still find that on the CVS or Walmart's shelves. It's still out there. So yarrow, down at the bottom, that you can use that as a poultice to help clotting blood. And ginseng, still drink that as a tea. That can be used for headache, cold or flu. Golden seal, still see that on the shelves. I still see that. Used for sores and skin diseases. And if you mix that with bear fat, because I know that's what we're all going to do, that can be used as an insect repellent. You would put that on and that would help keep the mosquitoes away. Lavender, painful joints, muscle pain, that kind of stuff, mint, all of those. They knew the uses of all of those medicinally. All right, moving on. So now we're going to look at Chinese herbal medicine. That's probably another big one. You see a lot of shops that are set up that sell this kind of stuff. You probably wondered, what is all of this for? This is where we dive into Lisa's not going to try to say some of these things because they're very specific and I don't want to mess up their names. But again, they're all here and they're written. So if you're curious and you want to know, you can always request a copy of the slide deck. So obviously, the Chinese go back way back, and you can see here 2800 BC. It's a very old group of folks, and they have a lot of interesting herbal medicine in these old books that they have, tonics and boosters and all sorts of things. And so sometimes when people are looking for alternative therapies for some illness that they have, they will actually go and they will seek out these alternative herbal medicines. And there are whole stores that are just, dedicated to this. So some of these Chinese herbs, you see here cinnamon, ginger, rhubarb, those were introduced to Europe through the Silk Road. So you'll see a couple maps for that. But that's how trade kind of got moved all around and how a lot of these things became main stem. And here you have one ancient collection lists 13,000 medicinals and then over 100,000 medicinal recipes. That's a lot. So for a lot of different ailments, pretty interesting. So common ones, again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I did want to put them up here so that you could see what they were. These are the names we would recognize them by. A lot of them do grow here. Remember, we're zone 7B for quite a while. Still 7A, B, most of the metro were kind of a transition zone through 8. A lot of those areas are found also in China. So a lot of these things do grow very easily here. So you've got ginseng, licorice root, ginger, cinnamon, um, Schisandra berry, goji berry, angelica, romania, and hawthorn. Some of those I don't recognize, but a lot of those I do, and they grow here. So you can see here what they do. Just for the sake of speeding things along, I'm not going to run through all of these, okay? So, but no, you can just reach out to me and I'm happy to provide a copy. So, psychoactive herbs. Psychoactive herbs used in religious ceremonies, recreationally, of course, for nearly 10,000 years. That's a lot. So I'm sure you probably recognize a few on here. You've got the coca plant. We might know that as cocaine. Also, what was in Coca-Cola right at the beginning, but now is not there. So people in northern Peru would chew that and get a high off of it. Made them feel really good. And then you would have cannabis, of course. So that's not new to the world. Cannabis has been around in China and India and Northern Africa for a very long time. So people have known about those properties. And then you've got the opium poppies. They're pretty, but they're also going to produce euphoria. So again, don't go out there, and see what you've got in your garden. And then you have peyote, which is a very small cactus. You see that in the bottom left. That has hallucinogenic effects when it's dried. You would put, I've done the research. You'd put a little bit under your tongue and you would see pretty colors. Salvia, that's one that has popped up occasionally here for sale, especially to minors. Eaten or smoked, it slid under the radar for a while because that's not monitored very closely, but it can give you, hallucinations, an altered state of consciousness. And then the betel nut, that's from the areca palm. So you can see that up at the tippy top here. It doesn't look like much, but it can it can really wreck your teeth. I remember watching some uh, documentary about something, and the men in these tribes would get these betel nuts and they would chew them, and they have a kind of a mild addictive property, similar to probably like cigarettes or something like that. But the hard nut, and them doing that absolutely wrecked their teeth. I mean, they were just nubs. I can't even imagine. So then they're probably chewing on them because of the pain. But yeah, I mean, addictive stuff everywhere you go. Herbs used in magic. This is always an interesting one. So, you know, magic in, yes, we have Wiccans and we have others out there. Sometimes people just, trying to, sage their house, that kind of thing. So it could be magic light or it can be real magic. I don't know, however you want to look at it. But herbs like rosemary and basil and bay leaf, that's used for protection, chamomile, lavender, peppermints, healing, love and attraction, rose petals, cinnamon, um, psychic abilities, mugwort, wormwood, luck and prosperity, certain herbs, purification and cleansing. Those are still used a lot, sage and juniper. And then some of the most commonly used ones, you can see sage, lavender, mugwort, bay leaf, and thyme. Herbs for rituals. So again, religious rituals. This isn't necessarily magic. This could be around the world that you have some type of a religious ritual that they're going to do, and they're using some type of herb in it for purification, protection, healing. One of those things that I read about. So you've got mugwort, sage, and frankincense. So I never really looked into frankincense because I live here, and that's not something that's mentioned at Growers Outlet when you go to buy stuff. But that's actually from the Boswellia tree, and it's just the resin. It's the very aromatic resin, and that was used in Babylonian spells. And you have frankincense and myrrh. That's obviously has biblical connotations. Used these are resins, and they were used as for rituals in the religion. Hence, bringing the frankincense and myrrh to the baby Jesus. And then you have ginseng, used a lot in Chinese traditional medicine, and then white sage that's used for purification and Wicca. Tobacco, lots of people use tobacco. That's very heavily used. Gypsum weed, which, I always thought of as a weed, literally like out in the crops and stuff, like go cut the Jimson weed down. But it's got hallucinogenic alkaloids used by the Navajo and the Hopi in their rituals. And then you have white sage, sweetgrass, and then Catawba rhododendron. That was a new one to me, used in purification rituals by the Cherokee. And then you have fennel, ginger, psyllium, and turmeric that was used to balance body and mind in this type of medicine. So, warning, of course, risks for herbal supplements. You can buy all of this stuff on the shelf or on Amazon because Amazon sells everything, but they are not regulated, really. They just aren't. And so, unlike prescription medications, the FDA doesn't really do a lot to these. A lot of times it's reactionary, meaning if something starts causing a problem, they'll get involved and pull it from the market, but they're not really heavily involved in doing anything before it hits the market, which is kind of scary. Um, so that means that the manufacturers don't really have to prove the effectiveness. So just if you so like some of the stuff that's mentioned here, yes, it does have some effectiveness, but one of the things is that you don't know is you really don't know what the concentration is of that particular herb or remedy in whatever you're buying. And so part of that is the contamination and mislabeling. There's no clinical trials to show what levels of purity or effectiveness they have. So they might be mixed with things like heavy metals or pesticides or other ingredients that you definitely don't want. So just be very careful about what you're buying, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Also note that some of these herbs can actually have interference with medications you may be taking. So like St. John's wort, it can have a beneficial effect for your immune system, but if you're taking birth control or antidepressants, you might have another baby and you might be more depressed. So be very careful. And ginseng can affect blood sugar levels, so it can actually make them a little higher. So you have to be careful. Overuse and toxicity, you want to make sure that you're only taking it within whatever range is recommended. Sometimes people are like, oh, it's natural. It's okay. I can take more. Not necessarily. Remember, most of these have been found to be useful in some cultures, so that's why they're available. But for instance, excess vitamin A can cause nausea and dizziness, and too much vitamin D, you can get irregular heartbeat and weight loss. Weight loss? Oh, I need to get some of that. Just kidding. All right. So the history of culinary herbs. We're going to dive into why you would eat them. So again, not going to jump too much into all of this fancy history, but just know there is a long and very rich history of trading and hauling these wonderful plants all around the world. You had the incense route that influenced Greek and Roman cuisine. You had the Arab merchants that were transporting these. Can't see if we can move this. I keep moving that around. Uh, But you can see the Silk Route up there. And if you get the slides, you can probably see it a little bit better. But all over India, the Saudi Peninsula, Middle East, up into parts of Mongolia, and all the way over into China. So a lot of traveling happened there. And then by the early 1800s, there were spice plantations that were established all over the world because people saw the value in them. And that kind of ended the Far East space trade or spice trade. Then you had old texts. Remember, I said that the in China they have a very, very old heritage, and so a lot of those books they documented all of this stuff. So using ginger, cinnamon, ginseng in both food and medicine. And then during the Renaissance, you had herbs that were more known for their culinary aspects. So they may have a medicinal capability, but people started experimenting more with cooking with them. And then monasteries, they had a lot of herbal knowledge and they knew how to grow stuff. So they would share that knowledge with folks. And so both food and for cooking purposes. And then today herbs are I mean, they're all over the place. And so this is kind of to open your eyes that there might be some interesting things that you should get out there and try because maybe you've just been stuck in a rut and hey, this might get you to go do a cooking class so you can learn about some other types of herbs around the world and improve some of the cooking that you're doing for yourself. So where did it come from? Here's some stars, and you can kind of see. So if it's an orange star, Mesopotamia, you have apples, coriander, dill, fennel, garlic, onion, and roses. From Greece and Italy, sage, parsley, chives, lemon balm, mint, thyme, valerian, calendula, and India, aloe, caraway, cardamom, castor oil, nutmeg, sugar, sesame oils, China, ginseng root, frankincense, ginkgo, jasmine, kiwi, licorice, loquat, lotus, lychees, mulberries, Europe, chickweed. That's a weed. That's why we always say plant out of place, because in some places it's not out of place. It's actually got a place. Here we just think of it as a lawn weed in the wintertime, though. Dandelion, elderflower, hawthorn, milk thistle, stinging nettle. A lot of these we consider weeds, but they have a very valuable resource they are to the folks where these came from. And then America, black cohosh, evening primrose, American ginseng, saw palmetto, slippery elm, wintergreen, and witch hazel. There's a lot more. That's just a little introduction. So we'll kind of breeze through common culinary herbs in North America. So these are ones that you're going to use pretty much all the time. You probably have them in your spice cabinet, and you use them more often than not, at least through the week while you're cooking whatever you're cooking. Unless you totally don't cook at home, and no judgment there. It's kind of nice sometimes. But you have rosemary, very aromatic. Love the taste of that. Sage, dill, marjoram, lavender. These are all used. Lavender, Starbucks, get the lavender purple drink. And you can make lavender ice cream and shortbread cookies. I think I was at the last, was it the awards ceremony at the Master Gardener award ceremony? Somebody brought in lavender cookies. They were very aromatic, very interesting. Chives, used a lot in Asian cooking and garnishes, lemongrass. Lemongrass has kind of a citrusy flavor. It's used for a lot of things. It's also used as an essential oil. It's also used in beekeeping, believe it or not. You can put that in water. It kind of mimics a hormone. So if you've got issues with bees getting in your pool, you can put some water over here with some lemongrass, and sometimes that will tease the bees over there. They'll go over there where the lemongrass scent is. Then you have fennel. That's got a very strong licorice flavor. So if you eat some Italian sausage and you're like, oh, that's a really strong flavor, that's fennel. That's a fennel seed. Then you have basil. That's used, that was pulled in from Italian cooking. I love a good caprese salad where you get some fresh basil, fresh buffalo mozzarella, and some big beefsteak tomatoes. Slice those up together and then use some balsamic glaze and put that. Oh, it's so good. Oh, Just can't wait until my tomatoes grow. Basil is my favorite, by the way. Mint, only put it in a container. It's very invasive. It will grow like crazy. So if you want to grow mint, that's fine. Just make sure it is growing in a container. And that's used in a lot of beverages. Again, very aromatic. It's also used in Vietnamese cooking and also in Thai cooking. Then you have parsley. So it'll emphasize other flavors. It doesn't give a lot of its own, but it will magnify others. And then you have cilantro, used a lot in Mexican and Middle Eastern dishes as an aside. Some people will taste cilantro and say it tastes very soapy. Some people don't taste that soapy and they like it. I am one of those that like it. And I always thought that I was the normal one, and those people that taste the soap are the weird ones. It's actually the other way around. So it depends on your heritage. More people taste soap than they do taste the actual flavor of it. So that's why a lot of folks, when you get a salsa or something like that, a lot of times now they'll bring out two. One has cilantro and one doesn't, because there's a lot of people that don't like cilantro for that very reason. You have oregano, thyme, and tarragon, and then bay leaf. So again, with bay leaves, some of these, specifically like bay, they do not, we're right, like they're 8A, 8B, something like that. They do okay in Macon and then south. They're more of a tropical, semi-tropical plant. So if you have a very sheltered location, you might be able to get bay to survive, not probably not thrive, but to survive here. But other than that, I mean, know that it is more of a tropical type of plant. But most of these others are temperate. They do okay here. All right, so now we're going to dive into the different types of herbs used in different types of cooking. So this is kind of a sampling. This is not the end all be all herb list for each type of cuisine, but this is going to take you through most of the major categories of cuisine that are out there. And you can see a lot of the different herbs that are used and how they're used in that cooking. So, like for instance, I'm kind of gonna just skim over these. You've got essential Greek herbs. You've got oregano and mint, dill, basil, thyme, marjoram, bay leaves. If you've gone and had gyros or some other type of like tzatziki sauce, that's like a big favorite of mine. I love tzatziki sauce. It's gonna, be in all of those. So it's a very Mediterranean type taste if you have that. And then some of the common Greek spices, cinnamon, cumin, cloves, nutmeg, allspice, mastic, and saffron. So you can see what they're all used in. Cinnamon, obviously, in sweet and savory dishes, both like moussaka. That was what I was actually trying to think of. And then the cumin a lot. We cook with that a lot here, but it adds kind of an interesting tang. So if you like gyros, I love gyros. That's kind of a blended meat, and then they put that on a big stick, and then it twirls and roasts, and then they cut it off, and you can taste all of that in there. I can taste the cloves, I can taste the cumin and the cinnamon. I love it. It's very yummy. So. And as a side, I'm going on a cruise next summer into the Mediterranean. So I'm looking forward to being able to try all of these. This stuff is really yummy. It's one of my favorite types of food. And then Mexican herbs and spices. So here you have like Mexican oregano, and you have I'm gonna mess that up. I'm not even gonna say it because I'm totally gonna mess it up. Some of these I have not heard of. Hoja Santa, that's gonna be a leaf used in mole and tamales. Then you have Mexican thyme, and you have Mexican mint marigold and avocado leaves. So again, you're taking a deep dive in here, but this is all stuff that if you go to a more traditional Mexican restaurant, not an Americanized one, this is stuff that you will find. And then some very common Mexican spices, chili powders. There's a lot of heat in Mexican cooking. So if you go like me, I don't tolerate heat very well, but it does add a lot of flavor, and it's really good if you can handle it. Cumin, coriander seeds, paprika, both the smoky and non-smoky varieties, cloves and cinnamon, and then you have the annatto. I guess I'm not quite sure what that is. And then, of course, Mexican vanilla, some of that. Yeah, very yummy. Very, very yummy. I got some when we went on vacation a few years ago, and I keep that. I don't let anybody use it. And we have French herbs and spices. So a lot of the herbs that we use in our cooking comes from Europe. It's just what they brought over. And so we've kind of adapted them to our own cooking. But you may be using these and not even really knowing it. So your classic French herbs, those are going to be thyme, tarragon, chervil, chives, parsley, savory, marjoram. And then you've got blends, spice blends. So you have the herbes de Provence, and that's going to be a mix of thyme, rosemary, marjoram, oregano, lavender, and that's used in very savory soups and stews. It's very yummy. I do tend to make that myself sometimes. You can buy it if you look in some of the less generic spices. You can find that, but you can also make your own very easily. Fines herbes, that's going to be the chervil, tarragon, chives, and parsley, and that's added towards the end of the cooking. And then the quatre pieces, that's going to be pepper, cloves, nutmeg, and ginger, and that's used in soups, sausages, and roulades. And then you've got Vandove. Um, I think that's how you say it. Somebody can jump on later and correct me. The sad thing is, I actually spoke fluent French when I was a kid, and then we came back here and I forgot it all. So it's kind of entertaining from that aspect. But that's kind of your French curry powder. And then you have some other stuff that's like your nutmeg and bay leaf and saffron. Saffron you'll find, like I said, that was a very valuable spice used around the world, and that's that Silk Road trade that brought saffron all the way around the world, and it was very valuable. Italian herbs and spices, again, another favorite of mine. Basil, used in pesto and sauces and salads. This is one of my favorite types of cooking. Oregano, parsley, rosemaries, thyme, sage, marjoram, bay leaves, very common spices that you'll find, your garlic powders, red pepper flakes, fennel seeds, black pepper, and nutmeg. And you can see all that they're used here for, so that can give you some idea for some dishes. I'm sure some of you probably, this is like your staple. This is a staple in my house. I'm constantly baking and making Italian style dishes because I just love the spice blends here. Korean herbs and spices. So there's a lot of, if you go up on Pleasant Hill area in Gwinnett County, there's a lot of Korean barbecue. There's a lot of places up there where you can get some really good Korean dishes. And this is some of what they use in their cooking. So you've got the parita leaves and green onions, garlic, chives, mugwort. Used in rice cakes and soups because it has kind of an earthy aroma to it. And then you've got Korean wild sesame, um, and you've got, and then here we get to some of the pronunciations. I'm not even going to try to do it because I will completely butcher it and then I'd feel bad. But you've got, we'll drop down to soy sauce because I can say that one. Soy sauce and then sesame oil, salted shrimp. That's used in kimchi and fermentation and seasonings, dried anchovies, making broth and soups and stews. And then you've got some more traditional Korean spice blends down below where you're mixing some of those together. So you can get a lot of that up there. It's a really nice mixing of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, all the Asian foods that you could possibly think of up in that area. I mean, great food. I definitely recommend it if you get a chance to go there. Middle Eastern herbs and spices. So you've got a lot of essentials, and you'll recognize some of those. So you've got za'atar, which that's going to be a blend of thyme, oregano, marjoram, sesame seeds, sumac, and that's used in dips and breads and meats and things like that. And then parsley, of course, used in tabbouleh and other meat dishes, mint, cilantro, soups and stews, dill, and seafood dishes, and rosemary, fenugreek. As an aside, if you see fenugreek out there on the shelf, it's used for nursing mothers. It's supposed to actually increase your milk supply. So that's an added benefit to it, one of the medicinal ones. And then you've got more popular Middle Eastern. You've got sumac, baharat. That's going to be a spice blend with pepper, cumin, coriander, that kind of stuff. And you've got your cardamom and turmerics and cumins. It's a very distinctive kind of flavor that you get from this. Similar to Greek, you can see a lot of the very same spices here, but just different mixtures and things like that. And then very traditional Middle Eastern spice blends like dukkha, ras el hanot, zatar, and harissa. Probably butchered it, but I tried. So all looks very good. Definitely worth trying. Indian herbs and spices. So a lot of traditional Indian cooking is very spicy. Um, I have to have the Americanized version of it. It's very tasty. Butter chicken's one of my favorites, and I can eat the heck out of that. But if it's very traditional, it can be very spicy. So you can see here they've got coriander, mints, a lot of common Indian spices like turmeric, cumin, cardamom, cloves, black peppers. They all have different names, of course, Indian names, but you can see if you see those in recipes, that's what that is. So you can see where they're used and how they're used there. Chinese herbs and spices, again, this is not an extensive list. This is probably just the most popular ones. But gingers and garlics, goji berries. I have a couple of goji berry bushes that I need to put in the ground soon. I bought them and didn't have a place for them yet. You've got danguai, angelica root, and then some common ones, star anise, peppercorns, cinnamon, cloves, fennel seeds, cardamom. Um, it's a very distinct flavor. All very good. Very good. Caribbean herbs and spices. So I like jerk chicken and I like goat too. Very tasty. And we're finding more and more places around here where we can get those kinds of things. I definitely suggest you go check it out because the cooking is very tasty and it's definitely something that I don't mind going back. It's the spice is not so much that I can't eat it, so it's kind of in between some of these spicier Asian type dishes. But thyme, you've got culantro, which it says it's similar to cilantro but stronger. Bay leaves, scallions, garlics. You've got allspice, nutmeg, and mace, cinnamon, ginger, Scotch bonnet peppers, and cloves. And some of the, like, for instance, if you go down and I've been in Jamaica and they have very savory breakfast dishes. So here we might have a lot of pastries and sweet stuff, but there a lot of it is savory. So it's different. It's a little different. They don't have, at least from what I'm remembering in the many times that I've been there, you can get um, some sweet stuff, but a lot of it is very savory. Then we have Japanese herbs and spices. So some of these you may not recognize. So shiso, masuba, mayoga, wasabi. You're probably going to recognize that. If you ever watched Lightning McQueen in the movie Cars, um, yeah, there's a wasabi scene in there. So you've got all of these different things. You've got pickled ginger that's often used in sushi, um, miso, that fermented soybean paste. So very good, very yummy. And then Thai. So again, I love Thai cooking. Sometimes it can be a little heated, a little bit of heat to it, but uh, very tasty. So lemongrass, that's going to have that citrusy aroma. So if you get like, you know, ramen or something like that, it'll be in the soups to flavor it. Uh, excuse me, galangal, it's ginger. It's like ginger, but a little bit of a peppery flavor to it, a little bit stronger. Lime leaves. We don't use that. Thai basil, you can purchase that. I've seen it. I actually think I have some out in my garden. cilantro, holy basil, you've got turmeric, coriander, cumin, white and black pepper. The thing to mention is that a lot of these, if you look, you actually can find some of them being sold in some of the big box stores. So if you have a particular type of cuisine that you would like to taste, the nice thing here we have in the Atlanta and in the Gwinnett areas, we have such a multicultural population that you can go find a lot of these ingredients right here. So, make a day trip and go check out some of these markets around here and pick up some of this wonderful stuff and see if you like it. African herbs and spices. So we've kind of got them broken down into region here. You've got your North African spices like a Moroccan blend, um, Ras El Anout. So that's a Moroccan blend of up to 40 spices. Harissa, that's going to be a Tunisian chili paste. Za'atar, that's going to be popular in Egypt. And then you've got some West African spices. Grains of paradise. That's a whole lot easier to say. Calabash, nutmeg, and iru, locust beans that are going to be fermented, and those are from Nigeria. Then you've got some East African, so berbere, an Ethiopian dish, and then you've got mitmita, another Ethiopian dish, and then I'm not even going to try that one, a Moroccan saffron dish, and then Southern African herbs, buchu, and that's, I guess, a medicinal herb used in teas and tonics. Rubios, that's a tea that you can find that in the grocery store. And then wild basil used in traditional remedies and cooking. So just a very abbreviated list, but you can see the rich history there of all the different stuff that you can find. So moving to the end, we've got herbs today. So how are herbs being used now? So, I mean, obviously, I went through a bunch of different stuff and they're used all through history and now and continuing now. Well, you've got urban gardening and food security. So, a lot of the community gardens, especially here, they'll grow herbs and then those are donated along with the other produce so that folks can have fresh herbs that they may not otherwise be able to grow. A lot of herbs are used for pollinators. So you've got lavender, which that grows here, basil, and those are really good for pollinators. So put some of that in there. You can have that yummy caprese salad and you can help the butterflies. Excuse me. And then you got companion planting. So herbs like mint and thyme, they're very, very aromatic. And there is some research that states that those aromatic essential oils that they have actually repel or help to repel insects. So if you plant those near your garden, maybe you'll have less bugs, right? And then carbon sequestration, so that might help for soil health by keeping that down in the ground instead of up in the air. And then waste reduction. So you can dry those herbs. Remember all the different ways I said that you can preserve herbs? There you go. So save them for the winter time. That's the best thing to do. And then research. So herbal medicine, that's a continuing thing. So a lot of these big pharma companies are constantly looking at a lot of these. They have, a lot of these old texts, and they're going through and checking out the research and testing things and seeing if there's something to it. So, they're still, and you can still buy a lot of these products. They're just homeopathic or natural. Peppermint for digestion, ginger for nausea. I remember when I had my kids, I had ginger candies and I had ginger tea because I had bad morning sickness. And that was one of the few things that got me up in the morning and I was able to actually function because I felt horrible. But if I was chewing on the ginger candies or drinking the ginger tea, it was better for a while. And herbs like rosemary and oregano, they're going to have good health benefits, a lot of antioxidants. And so that's, a benefit to your health. Essential oils, I mean, there's people that swear up and down that essential oils are the thing. You should be able to drink pure peppermint oil and it cures everything. I'm not going to discount that. There's lots of research to show that there are benefits, but it's one of those to each his own type things. I like to smell them, so I'll put it in a diffuser just to smell them, but it's not because I think it's going to make me any healthier. Just an example, turmeric. So for instance, we think back, and I know a lot of us want to forget about it. COVID. I had a really bad case of COVID. I have long COVID, and instead of settling in my lungs, it settled in my intestinal tract. And one of the things my gastroenterologist told me to take was turmeric because of its anti-inflammatory properties. So curcumin, which is the active compound in turmeric, is very widely studied now for its anti-inflammatory and antioxidant benefits. You can probably the best concoction, they say if you take black pepper with turmeric, that actually helps magnify the effects so that you are feeling more of the anti-inflammatory effects. And so I also have asthma, adult onset asthma, and I can take the turmeric as long as everything else is going well. I can actually get off all my medications if I'm taking the turmeric curcumin. So it does have some benefits there. And there is some recent research that's talking about, brain health up here and neuroprotection. So I haven't really seen much of that, but that doesn't mean that that's not going to be a thing too, because there's a lot of stuff we just don't know about. And so that is basically it. I didn't talk way over this time. So let me check the chat here and see if there's anything anybody's got questions about. So just as an aside, if you would like the slide deck, my email address is there. Feel free to reach out to me and I will be happy to provide the slide deck to you. If you got halfway in and you forgot about the first half and you're like, oh man, I really want to watch that. The QR code in the bottom right is for our Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. And it'll probably be next week, honestly. I'm off a little early next or tomorrow. I might try to get to it. But all my old stuff that I've recorded is housed there. If you want to see what other classes we have coming up, you can go on the left side to that QR code. That is going to be where our events are, events and classes. And so you can see what we've got coming up. Lots of good stuff coming up. I just turned in my list for September through November. So we've got classes, at least a couple, probably about 4 per month. Some stuff's new, some stuff's, recycled. We've got some specialists coming up. I did want to plug that going into September and then December, I've got a pruning muscadines vine coming up in September with Dr. Sarah Lauder. She's a specialist, viticulture specialist at UGA, and she's going to be doing a lunch and learn on how to prune muscadines. So if you've got muscadines or you ever thought about having muscadines, she's very personable and she will answer all sorts of good questions. And the follow-up to that is a live action workshop at Vines Community Garden, Harvest Quinette Community Garden over there in Loganville. We've got some muscadines there that she's going to come out in December, on December 6th, and prune and teach everybody who wants to come. It's completely free. You can come and learn how to prune muscadines from Dr. Sarah Lauder out at UGA. All right, enough of that. So let's see. Melody says, every year I mace myself making sauce. Yeah, be careful. Wear some goggles. Don't get it in your eyes. Thanks to my great grandmother, I've had more horehound candy than I care to admit. I had too. That was always in her candy dish, let me tell you. Coca leaves are still chewed and given to travelers who are at high elevations. Yes, that is very true because it does have benefits. So altitude sickness is a thing, and you can get very ill from that. I mean, it's debilitating, and everybody reacts differently. At elevation, I get just very lightheaded and I can't breathe, and that's basically it. I don't get sick to my stomach or anything like that, but there are a lot of people that do. So coca leaves will relieve that if you chew them. So yes, thank you for mentioning that. I love lemongrass tea. Yes, it's very aromatic. Oregano makes a great edible ground cover. Yes, it does. Very low grow, a toe tickler, if you want to call it that. Mountain mint. Um, We plant that for pollinators, has a similar flavor and properties to spearmint and peppermint, but not nearly as invasive. Correct. I have some of that in my garden down there. I plant it solely for the pollinators, and it tolerates some shade. Yes, it does. Thank you. We have a lot of international markets here in Gwinnett. Yes, we do. We do. We have a lot of them because we have a very multicultural population. So obviously they're going to cater to those folks. That's why I was like, get a road trip and come up here because you can get some of this really good stuff. A lot of this good cuisine. If you don't want to cook, you want somebody else to cook it, check it out. Come up and check out some of these awesome restaurants. We have like everything. I mean, anything you could possibly think of, we probably got it here. And if it's not here, it's probably in Atlanta, in DeKalb County. Um, Thank you, Cheryl. Excellent presentation. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let's see. If anybody's got any questions, toss them in here and I'll see what I can get to. I'll try some recipes. Yes, and that's why I wanted to do it. I wanted to get all these awesome lists out there so that you guys can think about cooking some other stuff and seeing, where did some of these spices come from? Like we got them here, we can buy them in the store, but where did they begin? Like where did they start? I don't think that, the Native Americans had basil. So they came from somewhere, but it's always interesting to see how far around some of this stuff traveled. Like, the different spice trails and trade and all of that and how complex it was and how it's even then when they didn't have planes to get around the world they still managed to get some of these spices around the world. It's amazing. So that's basically it. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you learned some good stuff. And again, if you want the slide deck because you want to get your shopping list and order some stuff so you can cook some things and get some new recipes, grab my email address there. And this will be up either tomorrow or possibly next week. I'm off for a few days, so it may take a little bit longer than that, but it'll depend on what I got to get done tomorrow. But thanks for tuning in. And y'all take care, and I'm going to stop sharing here and have a good evening.